Hi guys, I'm Harley, and today I'm going to be talking to you about functional communication training, or FCT. So I'm first going to start off by telling you what functional communication training is, how to use it, what it's used for, some of the interesting case studies that I found, and then lastly I'm going to show you why I support it. So our book defines that functional communication training is one of the most frequently used approaches to reduce challenging behaviors in people with autism. It involves a multi-step program that replaces a problem behavior with an alternative behavior. So who can use it? As I said, it is typically used with people on the spectrum, but it focuses more on the behavior issues such as aggression, self-injury, and inappropriate sexual behavior, so it can cover people on all parts of the spectrum. It also is not specific to age, so it can be used across the lifespan with children and adults, but today I'm going to focus more on the use with children. And because it deals with behavior, it could also work with people who have different disorders such as ADHD, schizophrenia, or those who have had a traumatic brain injury. But for the purpose of this video, I just researched more about the use with autism. So where can functional communication training be used? Functional communication training can be used by parents, family members, or trained professionals in a variety of different settings. Some examples of these could be at home, in the classroom, or at school somewhere, and also out in the community. How can it be used? I'm quickly going to go over how FCT is used and what the steps are. So in general, functional communication training is a more appropriate behavior. There is really a great figure on page 111 in our textbook that kind of lays out what a typical interaction between a student with a problem behavior and a teacher looks like, and then how it differs once they've implemented FCT. So a typical interaction before implementing functional communication training would look like the teacher making a request, the child then has a tantrum, the teacher then takes back the request due to the outburst, which then causes the tantrums to be more likely due to that negative reinforcement. So once functional communication training has been implemented, the interaction is going to look much different. So the teacher makes the request, the child then stops and asks for help, the teacher then provides more assistance or reinforcement, thus causing the tantrums to be less likely. So now I'm going to go over the steps of functional communication training. So our book lays out 7 step-by-step instructions for implementing FCT, and they're also listed in the Durand reference that I've listed as well. So step 1 is going to be to complete a functional behavioral assessment, and you're going to use 1 or 2 functional assessment techniques to determine which factors are helping to maintain the behavior, and this kind of shows what the behavior is and its severity. So step 2 is going to be to select the communication modality, and this is where you're going to want to see if you want the individual to communicate verbally or through AAC and how you want them to communicate with others. Step 3 is going to be to create teaching solutions, and this is where you identify the triggers for the problem behavior and then use them in a setting to teach an alternative response. And then in step 4, you're going to prompt the communication, and this is where you use the least intrusive prompt possible and then you prompt the alternative response. And you do this in the place where you want it to occur. So if you want this behavior in the classroom to be different, then you would practice it there. And then step 5 is where you fade the prompts. As quickly as possible, you want to fade the response so that you do not trigger a problem behavior during the training. Step 6 is you want to teach the new communicative responses. So you want to teach a variety of responses that communicate the same thing or serve the same function. The book uses a great example of saying help me and I don't understand. They both kind of communicate that you need some sort of assistance and are confused by a task. And then lastly, step 7 is where you want to modify the environment. So when it's possible and appropriate, you want to make changes to the environment to improve student tasks, and then those should be added when you can. So the case study example that I have is from the book, and it's about a 9-year-old boy named Hal. And Hal attends a school for those with developmental disabilities. He would get upset when his teacher would make a request that he thought was too hard to respond to, or if he didn't know how to answer the question he was asked. So he would get so upset that he would yell, violently slap himself in the face, and then eventually fall to the ground. The study shows that Hal does have some speech ability, but it's kind of dysarthric, so it's either too fast or the teacher isn't able to understand it. It's not very clear. So the researchers started off by taking several weeks to teach Hal to say the phrase, "I don't understand," when he became that upset. The longer they worked on this with him, the frequency of his violent outbursts decreased, and he was actively using his new alternative phrase. Hal was later tested again with a new teacher, and at the beginning Hal was using his phrases, but when he got upset, his teacher did not use FCT, she did not implement that, and then she did not give him prompts, and ultimately the teacher would walk away from him, and that just reinforced more of that negative behavior. So the researchers worked with him again on slowing down his speech and making sure that he knew to use those phrases. And they did this without informing the teacher, and when his speech and phrases improved, the teacher responded more positively. And I just thought this study was really interesting because it shows how much functional communication training can impact a child's behavior, and also it shows the impact that the teacher has, kind of willing to work with them. And it also talks about the renewal of the problem behavior, which kind of backs up one of the journal articles that I referenced as well. And then one of my other references by Bosch, there were two children that had self-injuring behaviors, and it shows that functional communication training after some IEP meetings was deemed most beneficial. So I have those that kind of give other examples too. And then I'm going to lastly show you kind of why I support functional communication training. So there's been a lot of research behind it that does have high efficacy, and I also support it because it has the potential to be very cost effective. Once the training is done, the reinforcements are done verbally, and you don't have to do them in a clinic or anything like that. They're really just anywhere the child goes. So on an Australian parenting website that I looked at, they talk about cost, which can be a very important factor for families deciding what kind of methods they want to use. And the only cost that I found is the initial behavioral assessment that has to be done by a professional, and then the training for the parents if the child does want to go, if the family wants to go that route and have the parent trained. And they have stated on that Australian website that their insurance does help pick up a lot of that cost, but I haven't found if that holds true in the United States also. And then I also support it because you can personalize the training to each person and their behaviors. So with the 4 main types of behaviors, including attention, tangible, escape, and sensory, you can give an alternative phrase for those with that specific type of behavior. Alright, so that is it. I just want to thank you guys for watching and let me share my views on functional communication training.